Since we have YouTube bloggers going, we'll all right, here we are on the Google Hangout, hanging with the pros with Jim Mcllvaine, former NBA basketball player with the Sonics, the Nets, the Bullets, current Marquette University announcer. And we have a couple bloggers here who are super excited to be on the Hangout with Jim, not just because of what he's done on the basketball court, but he is a fantastic and amazing blogger who has a lot more passion than just sports and basketball. So, Jim, without further ado, I'm going to give you a couple minutes just to talk more about yourself and what you're interested in right now. You've got basketball, you've got Marquette, you have racing. I know you have a lot of things going on, so just give us a quick little intro to yourself.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on. It's the first time I've ever done a Hangout, and I'm honored that you thought I'd be worthy enough to come on and do this with you. As you mentioned, I did play 7 years in the NBA. I've been doing the commentary on the radio for Marquette University men's basketball team since 2004, roughly. And then when basketball's not going on, I work for one of Johnson Control's battery companies, Optimal Batteries, and I run all their social media and do quite a bit of harvesting for them. And so it keeps me busy all year round. Plus, I've got 5 kids at home, so I'm a busy guy.
Awesome, great stuff. Yeah, we're loving your blog. You are, and I'm not just saying this because you're probably the most analytical blogger that we have. Not just pros, amateurs, or partner sites. You really get in depth. You have amazing content, and you really put a lot of stuff out there that makes a lot of people think. So we appreciate what you do on the blog.
I appreciate that. I've actually been blogging 2008, I think, on ESPN my partner on there on the radio, Steve the Homer Crew, we go on these road trips, and sometimes we'd end up in rental cars. We just started these conversations, and at that time, blogging wasn't really on my radar. But every time we got onto a subject like how to drive at night and not fall asleep, he's like, "You need to blog about this." So they ended up creating a blog on the ESPNMilwaukee.com website, and there's probably a couple hundred entries on there. And I've been after them for a while to try to upgrade the website a little bit, and they still haven't gotten to where I'd like it to be. So the opportunity to start blogging on SportsBlog.com, I thought it'd be a really neat chance to push a different audience.
Well, that's great. You can tell that's great that you're a seasoned vet. So without further ado, I know Rich is chomping at the bit to get some questions going. He's a big fan of yours. So Rich, why don't you start us off with the first question that you have for Jim?
Hey, Jim. Good to make your acquaintance. I catch your blog quite often, and like the host was saying here, you really do some in-depth stuff. I wanted to ask your thoughts on the upcoming NBA collective bargaining agreement. What are some of the things from a player's perspective that we can maybe anticipate, and also maybe do we expect kind of a long drawn-out thing that might turn into some missed games or something in the future?
Those are really good questions. They actually brought me in after I retired to speak to the players prior to the last CBA because I think there was a perception amongst the players that everything was going so well. I can't believe they're going to have a lockout again, or they're going to stop work or anything like that. And I said, you better believe it, because every time the owners want to go to the bargaining table, they know that they hold all the cards, because they can lock the players out and sit out for an indefinite amount of time, because those guys have a lot of other business interests, a lot of things going on. For a lot of the players, some of them depend on those paychecks as they're coming in. So the mounts quickly on the players, and they also know that every time that they go to collective bargaining with players, the owners tend to do pretty well. So it's their advantage really to push the players and see how much they can get out of them in terms of control. And that's really what it boils down to. Everybody says it's a money issue, but everything follows the control. And whoever kind of institutes the work stoppage, whether it's a strike or a lockout, I've always felt kind of shows who has control in the bargaining situation. And the players have never gone on strike. It's always been the owners locking the players out.
Very good stuff, yeah. Jake, just jump back on here. Jake, why don't you go ahead and shoot one of your questions over to Jim?
Gotcha. So, Jim, with the injury to Paul George, do you think that we're going to see less big-name NBA players doing international play like the World Cup or the Olympics?
That's cool, but it's kind of always been that way. I would hope that doesn't happen, but if it happens to us, it may happen to other countries as well, because there's a lot of really good NBA players from other countries, and the same concerns are there for those guys, although I think with some players in other countries, there might be a little bit more national pressure on them to play in international competition, whereas it's not that big of a deal with the U.S. Football really is kind of the big sport in this country, and whether or not an NBA player or a given NBA All-Star decides to play on a FIBA team or an Olympic team is kind of page news, really.
Yeah, just a horrific injury. Good stuff, though. So I have a question that actually is coming in from Justin. He was going to join on here. He had some audio issues, but he is the Fast Break blogger on SportsBlog. He's on Twitter at _Fast Break. And he had a question for you, that is, who was your favorite player to play against?
I really liked playing against Hakeem Olajuwon because he was, without a doubt, the toughest player to play against. And I knew he challenged me in all kinds of ways. And we could throw double teams at him. He was really good at dribbling out of the double team, passing out of the double team, or attacking quickly before the double team got there. And when you play at the highest levels of the game, you want to play against the best players night in and night out. And I told AC Earl a couple of years ago when we were at a retired players meeting, he's the guy that I feared playing against the most. And he's like, why would it be me? Why would it be Shaq or something like that? And the reality is, if Shaq scores 35 points on me, everybody kind of expects that, that's going to happen. But A.T. Earl was a guy who would go out and maybe have 4 points one night, and then the next night he'd put 40 in the box. And people are scratching their heads like, what's going on with this guy? And so you wanted to be the guy that caught A.T. Earl on a 4-point night instead of the guy who was trying to defend him when he ended up having 40.
Yeah, it's true. It's good not to be on the reverse of the highlight reel on SportsCenter that night.
Well, it's one thing if it's Shaq or Patrick or David Robinson or somebody like that, because people expect that. And A.T.'s actually was a really good player, just wasn't as consistent as those guys, so it surprised people when he put up those big numbers. He didn't want to be the guy that had that happen to him.
Yeah, good stuff. Rich, shoot us another question over to Jim.
Jim, from an NBA fan perspective here, we look around and we see this glamorous lifestyle that people are having in the NBA. Can you break it down for us? Like, just how arduous an 82-game season is, and what's the toughest part about being an NBA player that we as fans can't ever imagine or even appreciate? What are some of your thoughts on that?
I think the first year that you're in the NBA, it hits you probably right around the All-Star break or right before it, because you're coming up on the midway point in the season where the most games you'd ever played, and it's changed a little bit with AAU culture, but the most games you ever played in college was maybe 35 games. And there you are, and you're not even halfway through the season already. In the NBA, your first year, you've already played more games than you would have played the last 4 years. So that kind of surprises you. And it depends on how many minutes you play. And I know for some of the younger guys that play heavy minutes, it's a really big adjustment for them. I was always fortunate. I was only playing 10 or 15 minutes a night my rookie year. So it was kind of cool. I was cruising. My body would get banged up, but I wouldn't play so much that I wouldn't be able to recover from an injury over the course of time during the season. But that's a challenge that I don't think anybody can really understand until they actually go through it, especially if they're playing heavy minutes.
Yeah. So what about the travel as far as plane rides? Did you get sick of that? Did you get tired of it, or did you just get into a groove and you got on the plane and went to the next city? How was that for you?
You never you'd wake up in a hotel and not remember where you are, but that starts to happen after a while. The teams have done a really, really good job. I got into the league of making travel really easy on players. Most of the teams, if they don't own their own jet, they certainly charter really nice, comfortable jets. And so, pre 9/11, we'd be on the bus. Depending on the team, usually if it's a team, you get on the bus to the practice facility, so you don't have to pay parking while you're on the road. If it's not a good team, and I won't name names, but it rhymes with bullets, and they've changed that. You have to pay parking while you're on the road. So you take the bus pre 9/11, and it pulls right up to the plane. And there wasn't really TSA concerns or anything like that. You get on the plane, you fly to wherever you're going. The bus pulls out. You know, it's like the bus might as well just driven along with the plane because it shows up right when you get off the plane. It takes you to the hotel. You have to take maybe 10 steps outside of a building between getting on the bus to go to the plane and getting into your hotel. So the NBA teams have done an exceptional job of easing the travel as much as they can. It's harder in some cities, and I think this is another thing that people don't fully understand. Every road trip's a pretty long road trip when you're playing for the Miami Heat or you're playing for at the Seattle Sonics. Vancouver was a short trip for us, and Portland was a short trip, but everything else was kind of a haul, especially the West Coast teams that are so spread out. But you do spend more time with a plane, and it, in some ways, I think, leads to antisocial behavior because you spend so much time on the road. My agent always tried to talk me into having meals in the restaurant, but you just get tired, and you wake up and you call room service, and they bring the food to your room, and then you go to shoot around and come back, you call room service again. That way you're not walking up and down the stairs all the time. But you get into a rhythm and a routine, and even in the job I have now, I travel quite often, and it really doesn't even faze me that much at this point because I really don't know anything differently. My whole adult life, I've spent a lot of time traveling on the road, so it's kind of my comfort zone now.
Nice, good stuff. I never even thought about just location-wise of the travel and also life of room service as a player. That's good stuff. Jake, why don't you go ahead and throw another question out there?
Gotcha. So, Jim, do you think that there's one rule that the NBA needs to fix as soon as possible, and if so, what is it?
That would probably be related to flopping. I know they fine guys now. I don't think that's enough. I think if you really want to give away the incentive, because I mean, if I'm a player and I've got a chance to win an NBA title, I'll write as many checks as I need to cover flopping fines. What you should probably do is reverse the penalty and either assess the personal foul and a team foul to the guy who got flopping, or maybe double it up even and say you got caught flopping on this foul. Now you have 2 fouls. Your team has 2 more team fouls, and they're that much closer to putting the other team in the bonus for basically an acting job instead of a basketball play.
Yeah, good stuff. Something's definitely gotta be done about that. I'm gonna unmute Calvin, who is one of our bloggers who just jumped on, and see if he's joined and see if he can ask a question. Calvin, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, your video's turned off if you want to turn that on, but in the meantime, go ahead and ask Jim a question and then activate your video.
Yeah, sorry, my video's not working right now, but happy to ask a question.
Okay,
Hello,
sure,
Jim.
no problem.
Hello, Calvin.
Well, first of all, I'm not sure if this question has already been asked, but what was your favorite fan base that you've worked with?
I think there were a lot of really good fans all over the NBA, but I don't know that I saw as much passion for the team as I saw in Seattle. And we had a guy, Lawrence Sandretsky, who goes by Big Low, or like C-Fence dude, or whatever you want to call him. He's the guy that invented the defense thing where they hold up the letter D and the picket fence to games. He had his own little action figure. That guy would meet us at the airport after our road trips. If it snowed, he'd shovel pathways to everybody's cars and trucks for them so they didn't have to hike through the snow. And it didn't matter if we rolled in at 3 in the morning, that guy was there, stepping and cheering. Sometimes he'd have some friends with him, sometimes he wouldn't, but you just didn't see that kind of passion anywhere else. And you see it, I mean, look how they've embraced the Sounders out there. It's a great sports town. People love it. They really get into the whole lifestyle of it in terms of fan experience, and I really hope they get an NBA franchise back there sooner rather than later.
That's nice. Thank you for sharing. Along with that, also maybe share with us your favorite fan mail or message that a fan's been given you in the past.
You know, when we traveled on the road, people would always ask for our shoes because they knew NBA players get a lot of pairs of shoes. Some guys get 82 pairs of shoes. I didn't. I usually got a couple dozen. But towards the end of my career, I was having these plates put in them, so I only really had 2 or 3 pairs of shoes that I used all season because the plate really stiffened up the shoes, and they didn't wear out like the other shoes normally would from so much flexing. So I'd get a lot of requests for, can I have your shoes after the game is over? I'll wait after the game, and and I always told folks I only give those out to straight A report cards. So I get kids that would send me photocopies of their straight A report cards in the mail. I send off shoes to them, or I'll remember next time I'm in San Antonio, I'll throw an extra pair in the bag and then give the kids shoes. I'm sure there's probably one or two that I've forgotten along the way, but I gave a lot of pairs of shoes to straight A report cards.
That's good stuff. Shoes for grades. Okay, now I'm sure Rich was straight A student when he was in school. So now let's throw the next question over to him.
Looks like Rich froze on the screen there.
Rich froze up. I guess that we'll jump over to
straight A student. Something happened to his connection.
Something happened to his connection right then. All right, Jake, go ahead and go ahead and throw the next question out there then.
All right, so Jim, in your mind, who's the most underrated player in the NBA right now?
I'm biased. There's more than a few Marquette guys out there, so I'll go with Jimmy Butler. I know they really like him in Chicago a lot, but his growth and progression from his freshman year at Marquette to where he's at now, I think he's still got a lot more untapped potential that he's just waiting to show folks. And really, there were times, especially during his junior and senior year, I looked at the decisions he made on the court, and he passed up what I thought were really good shots. And I think he is so conscientious about trying to find an even better shot that it sometimes hurt the team because they wanted him to take that shot, but he couldn't bring himself to do it because he was confident that they could get a better look. And I think that maybe is carrying over a little bit to the NBA, but as he gets more experience and has more games under his belt and becomes really a seasoned veteran and he's really approaching that quickly. I think he'll really embrace his role and his place and probably surprise a heck of a lot of people who didn't think very much of him when he came out of Marquette.
Great stuff. Yeah, he's an excellent player, excellent defender. I see Rich is back on, and sorry about the straight A thing kicked you off. It must have was that not the truth then?
No, I don't know if that was the truth. I was never, I was always interested in broadcasting, and maybe the books weren't my highest priority. Jim, I wanted to ask you a little bit. In recent years, we've heard a lot about the NFL taking care of its players, like things Tony Dorsett with concussions and syndromes like that. Now, how does the NBA take care of its players once they leave the actual NBA? Is there any kind of medical health or treatment for these players once their playing careers are over? And is there any kind of stipend for people that run into financial problems? How does that work once you exit the NBA?
There's Cobra, which I think you get for 18 months, and that's about it in terms of what you can get from the NBA. The Players Association, during my last year in the league, instituted kind of like a health savings plan, and I think I had $12,000 or $15,000 put into that I've used mostly, and you can use it for yourself or for your family, and I've used it mostly to put braces on my kids. And I think they've expanded that. I'm not as dialed in with what they're doing now as I was when I was active in the league and on the executive committee and really spent a lot of time doing union stuff. But there's really, the challenge that's out there is players, when they're in the NBA, are at their most invincible point in their lives. If they blow their knee out, their goal is not to just come back from it, but my right knee is going to be stronger than my left knee that I never hurt. And a lot of guys can achieve that. What they don't realize is the long-term impact of what they're doing right now on their bodies. And so I was a long-time advocate when I was in the Players Union and active that I thought we should take all our group licensing money and put it towards lifetime health care for former NBA players, even if it was only starting from that point forward. And I'd still be in favor of that now, even if it only started from active players going forward. I think they're moving closer to that. But there's a lot of guys out there, and we were fortunate when I was in the NBA to have the retired players meet at some of the same locations and same times that the regular Players Association met, because really you look at the retired players and it's a window into your own future. And when you see 50-year-old guys walking around like they're 70, 80-year-old men, it gives you a good perspective on where you're headed, what you're doing to your body. And I had the benefit of talking to some guys that were a little bit older than me in the NBA, like Joe Wolf, And the conversations we had were really enlightening when he'd say things like, I just wonder when I'm going to need my first hip replacement. I said, Joe, you never hurt your hips. And he said, look at what you're doing to your body. You're pounding up and down on these courts. Do you think you're not going to need hip replacement surgery? And it had never really occurred to me before because I hadn't really had hip issues. But yeah, I'm probably putting a lot of mileage on my joints. And even if I never had really catastrophic injuries, it's probably going to catch up with me at some point, and I'm probably going to need some orthopedic care in a variety of locations on that body.
Great question. Excellent answer. Definitely a big issue, especially in the NFL right now too. We're seeing a lot of traction and momentum going that way. Jake, go ahead and shoot your other question out.
Jim, if you could give one piece of advice to young basketball players everywhere, what would it be?
Learn how to dribble proficiently with both hands. When I coached my own kids in grade school and junior high, most of our offense and all of our defense was focused on making kids dribble with their offhand, whatever that was. Usually it was their left hand, but that basic fundamental part of the game is so overlooked these days and so rarely worked on that it gives you a great competitive advantage when you instruct a kid, look, this is the right hand, you can dribble with this one and pick them up at half court. You can't do it because the coaches never work on it. The closest they come to working on it is let's do some left-handed layups, and a lot of the kids end up dribbling with the right hand and shooting with their right hand on the left side of the basket, and that basic skill is never really developed. And it's one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of AAU basketball because I don't see a lot of emphasis on skill development. I think there's some with really good AAU programs, but it's really hit and miss.
Good stuff. Definitely something for all the youngsters out there playing to take advice on. Rich, you got another question?
Yeah, I wanted to get your opinion, Jim, on the development of these super teams, these big threes, if you will. To me, it almost doesn't seem fair that a player like the Miami Heat coalition down there, LeBron James took less money to become with this big three, and it seems to me it gives some of these power teams an advantage. Like the Milwaukee Bucks may never come up with their own personal big three, but how do you feel about the assimilation of these big threes and just all the ramifications that go along with that?
It's kind of the reality of the NBA, and it's a different game than football, even, where a quarterback can have such a big impact on a team. Definitely baseball, the other sports, and that all you need is a couple of really good players, and it can put you immediately in a position to win a world championship. It seems like every collective bargaining agreement we've gone through with the owners, one of the things they've always stressed is they want to restrict player movement more. And if you take sports out of the element and say you want to be a teacher, you want to be a doctor, and you get your doctoral degree or you get your PhD certification, and suddenly somebody comes to you and says, okay, you're headed to Duluth, Minnesota, and that's where you're going to be a teacher as long as you want to be a teacher. And what if you've got family in South Carolina, you always want to live in Salem, Oregon, but here you are in Duluth, Minnesota? I don't think anybody would say it's right that that person has to be stuck practicing medicine in Duluth or Salem or South Carolina or anywhere else. At some point, they should have the opportunity to choose where they'd like to work. And I don't think just because it's sports that you can look at these people and say, you don't have a right to choose where you want to work at some point in your career. You always have to let somebody else make that decision. The challenge that the NBA has, and I've blogged about this, is that there's such inequity between the income tax-free state teams and the major market teams and everybody else. And it's really only 10 teams. There are Texas and Florida teams, and Tennessee, and then Los Angeles, New York, and LA. Whenever you look at the free agents and where the top free agents want to go, it's always the major markets, and it's always Texas and Florida because they can make more money out of their contract or they can keep more money within their contract. And as long as that system is in place, regardless of what the owners try to do in terms of restricting movement, that's going to be where players are going to want to gravitate to, especially the major markets, because you can restrict calories and all that stuff, but they can go sign a shoe deal, and they know they get 20, 50, 80, 100% more money if they play in New York or LA versus playing in Cleveland or Indiana.
Cool.
Yeah, good stuff. Those are great blogs for sure. Jake, you want to shoot your last question over there for him?
Well, those were my 4 questions, so. I don't got any more, honestly.
I've got a question for Jim, if he doesn't mind. 2 of them, actually. 2-part, 1 small. Jim, I want to know what happened to that wicked flat top haircut you had in college.
I got married, and my wife was not such a big fan of the flat top. So, in fact, it's a little bit lighter than it would be naturally, and that's also my wife's doing. Happy wife, happy life.
What's your initial reaction to the Power 5 conferences coming in and saying they're going to adjust the way they give stipends to the players? How do you feel about that? And I don't know if you want to go into in-depth, but what's your gut reaction, your first reaction?
Well, I'm a Marquette guy, and we're not in one of the power conferences anymore because we don't have a football team. But at the same time, Marquette spends as much on their program and is invested in the success of basketball and their other sports as much as any school in the country. At the end of the day, the thing that makes college basketball so special and draw for fans is the NCAA tournament. And you're not going to have that excitement and that level of energy and enthusiasm without those 64 teams. You could put 64 teams from the 5 power conferences in there, and it's not going to be the same tournament because Norfolk State's not there to upset North Carolina, or George Mason's not there to upset Duke, and that's what people live for in that tournament. So, as much as the Power 5 conferences wield literally a lot of power because of their resources, at the end of the day, in terms of basketball, they really need the rest of those conferences to make the game successful at that level because it's such a huge part of it and such a huge draw as the energy built through February and into March that they'd lose too much if they didn't find a way to work with those non-power conference schools and make sure everybody had at least the opportunity to be competitive. Now, having said that, I think there's probably way too many Division I basketball schools right now. And my partner on the radio, Steve the Homer True, came up with an idea several years ago to have 256 teams. I've probably blogged about that more than once, and I think it makes a lot of sense. The NCAA always pushes to have more teams in the tournament, and I think that would in some ways dilute the tournament. But what Homer has suggested, and I'm a big fan of it, is if there's only 256 teams, everybody goes. And then you can play the first 2 games at the higher seed home court. Only half the schools are traveling, and the kids spend more time in class. And then after that first weekend, and you can get rid of a conference tournament that may not make any money for your conference. It may end up costing the schools a lot of money. After that first weekend, then you get the nice 14 bracket that fits really good on one piece of paper, and you go off into your different parts of the country and play your tournament. So I think it's a really good idea. It needs to be somebody else's idea for it to be instituted.
Thanks.
Yeah, good stuff. This the most exciting tournament in all of sports, I believe, and there's always finding ways to make it more exciting, and we'll see how that goes. So that's it for this this edition of Hanging with the Pros on Sports Blog. Before we sign out, let's just go one by one and let everybody know where they can find you. Let people know your Twitter handle and your blog. We'll start with Jake, then Rich, go ahead and shout out your Twitter handle and your blog, then we'll finish off with Jim.
Hey guys, if you want to find me on Twitter, it's just my name, Jake Elman, and my blog should be in the description there, but it's jakeelman.sportsblog.com. Hope to see you guys there.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. Rich Winter from Salt Lake City, Utah. You can follow me at Panic Galore. And of course, you can find me on the Sports Blog website, www.panicbutton.sportsblog.com.
Am I the last one?
Yep, you're the guest of honor, the last one to close us out.
You can find me on Twitter at Jim Mcllvaine, and I'm on Sports Blog somewhere. I'm not exactly sure what my URL is, but if you Google me and Google Sports Blog, I'm sure you'll find me somewhere.
You will be at jimmcllvaine.sportsblog.com, so just your full name .sportsblog.com.
Sounds good to me.
Perfect. Well, we appreciate you guys jumping on here, and everyone who watched it. We'll have it recorded on the YouTube page in a little bit too for anyone who wants to watch it later. So thanks again, you guys, for jumping on, and we look forward to the next one.
Great
Thanks,
question.
guys.
Thanks for having me.
See you guys. Nice to talk to you, Jim. See you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.